In Chapter 7, we're going to learn how we can create a chart in Excel. And keep in mind, a chart or a graph, they sometimes refer to it, is just a picture of numeric data that's in your worksheet. If you'll know, anytime you look at a picture, it's worth 1,000 words. And many times when you have numbers within a worksheet, you can bring those numbers to life by creating a chart or a graph pertaining to those numbers. So we're going to learn how to do that in Chapter 7. And we're going to begin by looking at the objectives that are on page 239. We'll start with creating a chart with data in a current Excel worksheet. After we've created that chart, we'll size, move, and then learn to delete charts. We'll print a selected chart, and then we'll also learn to print a worksheet containing a chart. We'll choose a chart style, layout, and format for a particular chart. We'll learn to change the chart location. And then finally, we'll learn to insert, move, size, and delete chart labels, shapes, and pictures. So a lot of fun things hopefully you'll appreciate in Chapter 7. If you'll notice on pages 240, 241, these are the model answers that we'll find once we're complete through each of the projects in Chapter 7. On page 241, we begin by description of creating charts. And actually in Project 1, we'll create a chart from scratch using some data that's in a current worksheet. We'll actually create a column chart. And then we'll change the size of the chart, we'll move it to a different location, and then make some changes to the numbers, which will ultimately affect the chart. On page 242, I want to direct your attention to Table 7.1, and it describes the different types of charts that Excel has to offer. And keep in mind that when creating charts, whether it be in Excel or any other application, you want to choose the type of chart that's most effectively going to describe your data. You don't just choose a pie chart because you like the way it looks, or you don't just choose a column chart because you like the way it looks. There are certain chart types that are used in specific circumstances. For example, a pie chart, you'll see there in the middle of the table, is used to show proportions or relationships of parts to a whole. A column chart, on the other hand, compares separate, non-continuous items as they vary over time. A line chart shows trends and changes over time at even intervals, and it emphasizes the rate of change over time rather than the magnitude of change. So you can see that these descriptions will hopefully give you some insight as to which chart you should select when charting information in your worksheet. At the bottom of page 242 and 243, you'll see a chart that we'll be creating. They describe the chart, the different parts of the chart. When you create a chart, the horizontal or the x-axis at the bottom describes the data series. You can see there at the top of page 243, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. That's your x-axis or your horizontal axis. Your vertical axis, or sometimes referred to as your y-axis, will give you amounts typically. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see a legend which will describe the colors of your data series. Those columns, in this case, describes what each of the colors mean. If you only have one data series, then you don't need a legend on the side, and you'll recognize that when you create a chart with one data series. Typically that legend will say like Series 1 or Series 2, and that is not descriptive. You don't need it, so you can delete the legend at that point. One thing that this chart doesn't show that I'll be emphasizing throughout is chart titles and X and Y axis titles. Every chart should have titles on that describe each of these locations. Along the x-axis, for example, you may describe that as quarters, and that's totally fine. And then the y-axis might be sales. I don't know exactly what those numbers are, but there needs to be a description that tells the users what those numbers are. And then also a main chart title. Maybe these are regional sales, I don't know, but there needs to be titles for the chart. At the bottom of page 243, we're going to start project 1A, and I've already opened Sales Chart Workbook and have saved it as they've asked. And then what we're going to do is use the data in this workbook to create a chart. So the first thing you have to do in creating the chart is select the cells that you want to use in the chart. And in this case, we're going to select A1 through E5. Typically, let me widen this just a little bit. Typically you'll always have a range of cells that has labels in it, and then you'll have a range of cells that has numbers in it. That'll always make up your chart. In this case, we're going to include the labels and the numbers, both for the columns and the rows. So we'll select A1 through E5, and then one way to create a chart is by pressing Alt F1 on your keyboard, that keyboard combination. That immediately creates a column chart and places it in the current worksheet. And at that point you could change your chart type, you could move it to a different sheet, move it to a different location in the same sheet. A lot of options that you have, but the Alt F1 will give you a real quick picture of the data. Now it's a column chart, that may not be the most appropriate type of chart, but it gets the chart in there and then you can modify it as you see fit. The first thing that we're going to do to this chart is we're going to resize it, and if you want to resize it both vertically and horizontally, you can hold down the Shift key, and as you hold that down you'll lay your mouse on the right corner. Notice as I'm dragging down it's increasing the width and the height at the same time, and it's in proportion. If you only want the height increased, you'll use your bottom or your top middle handle. It'll change to a double-sided black arrow, and I can increase the height. I can increase the width using the side handles. You want to get a double-sided black arrow when you use that, and that'll change the width. But if you want both at the same time, you use the corner handles. And if you want to increase it the same both vertically and horizontally, you do hold down the Shift key. If you want to move the entire chart, which you notice it's actually covering the data, use the border of your chart, get a four-sided black arrow, and click and drag it wherever you want to position it on the same sheet. And then, as I mentioned before in the objectives, if you make changes to the data in your worksheet that affect your chart, then it'll automatically update your chart. And they want us to make a few changes here. In cell B2, now this is going to affect first quarter northwest. So first quarter northwest is blue. Notice it's at 300,000 and 300,560, sorry. So we're going to change that to 421,720. Now when we change that in the worksheet, it'll automatically update it in the chart as well. And they have you making changes to the other data as well. But the point here is that any of these numbers, all those numbers, are linked to the chart on which it was created. In Project 1B, they're going to show us how we can print just the chart. For example, if I click outside of the chart area and I don't have anything selected except maybe a blank cell, and I go into Print Preview, this will print the worksheet itself and the chart together. Okay, now I know that that's not going to fit on one page, so I'd have to resize it or position it so that it would all fit on one page. However, if I wanted to print just the chart, if you click on the chart to select it, now when I preview it, it prints out just the chart on one sheet. Go back to the Home tab. I'm going to resize this just a minute and try to fit it all on one page as I was showing you before. Okay, so now you have the worksheet and the chart. You could have also changed that to landscape. That would have fit without having to resize the chart. The other thing is, if I click on the chart, like I mentioned before, print preview it, then it prints out just the chart. Okay, and they explain that in, or they provide that exercise in Project 1B.